Breaking the Consensus, the webinar show that asks questions and meets people that the mainstream media probably would prefer we didn't. Tonight, I'm in the company of the wonderful Senator Jim Walsh to have a look at the recent general election in Ireland, what happened, how it went, who were the winners, who were the losers. Senator Walsh, lovely to have you with us tonight.
Thank you very much, Paddy.
Now, why did we have a November election? Winter elections are horrible.
They are. I agree with you. As somebody who was involved in a number of campaigns in winter time, they should be avoided. And I actually thought that they might steer it to getting back to the summertime, yes, by having it maybe a little bit earlier than November, and then the next time go back to the summer. When I was in the Oireachtas, we always had summer elections, actually, which made a big difference. And
it was 82 we had the winter election, wasn't it?
Was, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel sorry for some of my successors now who were on the Senate campaign over Christmas and into January. I mean, I remember that happening in 92, 93, I think it was.
Horrible.
And it's a horrible time to try to be canvassed. But anyway, such as it is, I think it was more or less thrust upon them to a degree, Okay. I'd say he was anxious enough to go, and I thought they were both determined to go to the spring, but the media kept bringing it up as a topic and as a subject, and I think eventually it got legs of its own, and I think that as much as anything.
It's also would have to be a very early spring, wouldn't it? You still weren't going to get out till late. I think it was early February. Which is,
yeah, well, February. I think you might have gone into early March because it's from the start of the government. But
that would have been
the other thing, of course, that influenced it was, I think, the Sinn Féin difficulties and where their vote came back significantly. There was probably temptation there to go in case
they regroup.
Down.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. You never give your enemy a chance to regroup.
That's right. But it didn't turn out to be as good an election for Fine Gael as appeared at the start of the campaign,
Yes. You thought they would do better, or did the polls say
No, I thought they would do better. I thought they would have got more seats. Yeah, I thought they would have got more seats,
And yet they were facing a situation where they were going in with over half of their Dáil representation retiring, which meant you didn't have incumbency.
No, I think that was 17. And I did hear the Taoiseach and others in Fine Gael being asked about that. And their viewers said, no, we've good candidates, and it's depending on the people in the local area. But incumbency does matter. Name recognition matters.
Oh, it's hugely important.
I think they lacked that. And I would imagine if you analyse the constituencies where they didn't achieve success, probably would have been, like Donegal, Wexford, for example, where an outgoing TD didn't stand again,
And the name recognition was gone. And that, of course, leads you into, if you're a party, you end up having to do what they did, which was run a presidential style campaign focused on your leader. And given the limited capacity of their leader, that was always going to be problematic, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it is, because events sometimes can, kind of cause problems or difficulties for a leader. Plus the fact, I think you need to have the structures right and in place. Yes. Candidate selection, very important. Policies, very important. And then the leaders are kind of a bonus to that, rather than the campaign depending on a presidential style leadership.
In fairness, Harris was never going to be a bonus. He's a man of limited ability. I know him. He's a man of limited ability and next to no charm. He's not Bertie Ahern.
Yeah, no, but then very few are. But I've met him since he became Taoiseach.
Yeah.
And it did strike me that, he had more of the bonhomie than I would have associated with him previously. I would always thought he was quite serious young man, But he did show a side to him, I thought, that wasn't too bad. So you said that, not me, okay?
Oh, I'm on record as being not a fan. So it's hard. It's hard for me to be rational around him. So Fine Gael, where did you feel Fine Gael most lost out? Where were the sort of the big losses for Fine Gael? I mean, they had some extraordinary results in Laois. In the Laois constituency, 65-year-old Willie Aird, local councillor, topped the poll. at 65 years of age on his first outing for a general election. That was an extraordinary result.
Yeah, I remember on the General Council donkeys years ago when I was there.
Willie was
Willie
there.
you know, yeah.
So
I actually thought he was older than 65, but anyway.
Well, he will be when if this, as you were saying, this runs 5 years, he will be.
But then you see Donald Trump and Joe Biden have changed the whole demographics of politics.
Well, the demographics caught up, age caught up on Mr. Biden.
It did actually.
In that dreadful debate performance.
Right.
We would kind of hope that no Irish TD will be subjected to that kind of performance. But where did you see Fine Gael mostly losing out, if there were places you thought they lost out?
I suppose Wexford was one, you know, okay, they've got one in
How did you feel the Wexford constituency, those two new constituencies went? I mean, one was basically truncated Wexford, but the other one was a whole new thing, a Wexford-Wicklow mix-up.
Yeah, I think they went as more or less as anticipated. Now, in the early stages of the campaign, or before maybe it got off the ground, I would have thought that the last seat in Wexford constituency was going to be between Sinn Féin and Fine Gael. And
how did it turn out?
Oh no, Sinn Féin got it.
Yeah.
And took it comfortably, actually, you know.
The Fine Gael were not in contention.
No, they weren't in contention. And I could see that, like, I was down at the count, and from the time the first few boxes opened, kind of it was evident the way the ball was going, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they'll rally, and they'll obviously try and see.
Well, Wexford Fine Gaelers
not easily.
Wexford Fine Gaelers are a hardy crew. I remember them, you know.
That's right. But then the North Wexford, as you probably know, would have been a much stronger Fine Gael area.
Yes.
In the south of Wexford.
Yeah.
You know, they always had more, and of course, somebody sitting in the middle of the constituency in the Enniscorthy area always had a big advantage
because they could draw from both sides.
North and south, you know what I mean? Were contiguous to you.
Yes.
So you were able to draw, you know, support from
like our friend from the hard shoulder. Yeah.
That's right.
So the North constituency, where I thought it was sort of almost equal Wicklow and Wexford, the 3 seats go to Wexford. How did you pull that off?
Yeah, that was strange. Well, I suppose Ben Brennan had quite a big association with Arklow in particular, and South Wicklow. You know, he had business there for years, and so he might have been seen. He would have been well known in that area, so he would have attracted support from it. And also Pat Kennedy, who ran for Fianna Fáil, I think he was living marginally outside the constituency. He was in the just above the boundary in Wicklow. Yeah. But he ran a good campaign, and there wasn't going to be 2 seats for Fianna Fáil. Yeah. So Malcolm, obviously the bigger population, also had, I'd say, the higher profile maybe as well.
Malcolm's been there a good while.
Sorry?
Malcolm has been there a good while. He's been a senator. He even had, which was very hard for him, that awful thing of being the shortest TD.
Yeah, he was very unfortunate at the time that he won the by-election and then had to change course.
Yeah, lost
when after the general election and went to the Senate, I think. You know,
yeah, but he did, and he's worked very hard and has continued on. Yeah,
yeah. And politics is his life, you know. Yes,
it is. Yeah, I've met him once. I don't know him, but I'm aware of him, and he had a nasty incident early in his career, and it didn't derail him, where an attempt was made to derail him. And I don't think it did any good to the people who tried it at the time. The rest of the country, Fianna Fáil. Micheál Martin is sitting on his best result ever. How did Fianna Fáil do so well?
Well, when you look at it, like, I mean, we got 1% more than Fine Gael, but we got 10 seats more.
Wow.
So we were very lucky with the transfers. Now, we've become probably more transfer friendly.
Yes.
Which probably helped. But also, I have no doubt that being in government with Fine Gael meant that for, you know, second time around, we were getting Fine Gael transfers. We got them the last time. but not to the same extent. But, you know, I mean, even in the exit polls, I was surprised when I heard that where Fine Gael had two candidates,
Yeah.
Fianna Fáil were picking up 19% of the second preferences
Yeah.
from the Fine Gael first candidate who's going to be eliminated.
Yeah.
Like that was extraordinary, you know.
And that's a disaster for Fine Gael.
Oh, that
But
was
of
a
course, Fine
disaster
Gael
for
were
Fine Gael,
operating with Fianna Fáil in general didn't lose incumbency. They had name
No.
recognition. And even where, say, County Kilkenny is a beautiful example, they were running Chap Clear, who was a poll-topping county councillor.
That's right.
You know,
That's right. Two strong TDs.
Two apps, you know, they weren't going to lose either of them.
No. And then John Paul Phelan not running in South Kilkenny.
Disaster for Fine Gael.
You know, for Fine Gael, yeah. Running it. So,
John Paul's health precluded him staying in politics, but for Fine Gael, that was, they had nothing, no base. And of course, the loss of 6,000 votes to North Tipperary
that didn't help
the northern candidates for Fine Gael.
No. The constituency boundaries and the changes that take place to them are very problematic for parties and indeed for individual TDs as well, you know.
Yes.
And I often wonder, you know, this need to have so many public representatives. Should they broaden the band?
Yeah.
And the integrity of county boundaries is a very important issue.
Well, you see, I can see why the integrity of people say, oh, no, it's not important. But if you're in a county, a portion of a county that's moved into a different constituency, it means your councillors are dealing with a different TD. They're dealing with a TD who's not responsible in your county, if you like, may only be drawn marginal votes from your area.
Yes.
And that can be a real problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Micheál Martin has had he's leader since 2011.
Correct.
There have been continuous rumours that he would seek the presidency. Doesn't look like he will now.
No, I don't. No, I don't think he will. I don't think he will. Now, one never knows. You know, sometimes what would actually be going on in his mind. But I doubt. I doubt if he will. You know, he'd get the Taoiseach's position now, and I think, you know, therein lies a degree of power and prominence, and I think he'll hold.
Why would he retire? Why would he retire to the Áras?
Yeah, I don't think
when he can make things happen in Marion Street.
Yeah, I don't think he will do that.
Fianna Fáil got what, 50 seats?
48.
48. The two parties between them, how many do they need?
They need
to form
87.
a government? They need 87.
And they actually have, now 87
they need a bit more.
Is roughly exactly 50% of the number of TD.
That won't work.
Depends on where the Count Corla is. But you need, probably for comfort, you need to be in the 90s, 1995, somewhere in that period.
Yes.
And they need to be solid.
Yeah.
So that's what I presume they'll be building for.
Yeah.
And
now,
I thought
Labour
it was a very clever move of the regional group to come together and enhance their numbers. They have two new TDs in it.
Yes.
Gillian O'Toole, I think, and Barry Heenan, who's one of Finney McGrath's people on the ground. And you know,
but ideologically, a very scattered bunch. You would have
reasonably scattered, yeah. But you know, self-preservation would be a commonality that would be shared by all of them. Like, you know.
I love that. What's their ideology? Self-preservation, sir.
So I suspect it could be reasonable. One or two of them might be a bit shaky. I wouldn't like to be 100% depending on the but I think the majority of them would be solid, you know. I mean, like if Sean Kenny and Michael Lowry, indeed, I think as well would be solid. And
of course,
if
the government does end up depending on Michael Lowry, that'd be an extraordinary outcome, wouldn't it? You know, even 5-10 years ago,
it's happened.
It wouldn't. Fine Gael have depended on him before, much as they would pretend they haven't.
Yes, that's
but
right,
it would be an extraordinary outcome.
Yeah, like Lazarus rising from the dead, you know. But I mean, he's a, you know, he's an absolutely committed politician
He is.
and has consolidated his position in North Tipperary. I mean, who would have thought that he would have had the longevity that he has had as a poll topper?
Not only has he consolidated in North Tip, the portion of Kilkenny that has gone into North Tip is now almost emphatically his, I'm told. That he has been working it since the day it went in. And he's the nearest TD anyway to it, so well, you see, that's what counts. You do. Process matters.
I mean, a lot of people, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody, if they have an issue or a problem, somebody that's accessible, that go to, and somebody who will follow through on you resolving the issue for them, whereas a lot in politics will tend to get the letter back out. Say, I'm looking into this.
I made representations.
When there's no resolution, the people become disillusioned. And that's a fairly frequent experience.
I think it was Avril Doyle who told me the story that she met a voter who was complaining about a door on her house. And Avril was about, I suppose, the fourth or fifth TD to write it down in a notebook. But the thing was solved within 24 hours, and she got 17 votes out of that house because they credited her. And as she admitted herself, I hadn't even gotten back to anyone about it.
No, but you see, that's what happens. But I remember the story being told. Brian Lennon, who represented Roscommon, Brian Senior now, at one stage. And Brian was over at a wake in Roscommon of some supporter or something. See, and while he's there, this person took advantage of him being there, and she had some issue or some problem that she needed resolution to. Brian took a careful note of it. And then someone asked him to come up, Brian, and sit beside the fire, warm yourself up. And Brian is there, and she could see him with the piece of paper, and he folded it up. And he folded it quite a number of times.
Oh, no.
Eventually, it was a small piece. And he ended up throwing it into the fire.
Oh, God, in front of the woman.
Yes. So
well, he lost her vote and everyone in her family. And the postman's
very nice fella, actually, Brian. That was one of the stories that was told about.
You're after reminding me the story my brother-in-law tells of being at a funeral, I won't say where, and the local TD shuffles in beside him, digs him in the ribs. Dick, who's dead? Declan told him. Oh, thank God, I know them. I knew I should stop when I saw the cars.
Well, that's happened, I know somebody in my own constituency that rambled in to a funeral. Lately, it was the undertaker was telling me, and the undertaker was wearing obviously black suit and black tie. So the person, we'll keep it neutral, went up and sympathized him.
Well, not altogether inappropriate. Maybe the undertaker wasn't making enough out of it. All politics is local. Funerals are as local as they get.
Absolutely.
Were there results around the country that delighted you? I won't ask were there results around the country that displeased you, because I'm sure there were. But were there people that were elected you thought, oh, that's good, that's a nice one? Or people that stood out, results that stood out?
There was. I was glad that John Connolly got elected in Galway West. I've been talking to him and I'd be friendly with him in O'Keefe. And Eamon was opting out. He spoke to me actually before he opted out. And I knew he was thinking about it. And he asked me what was life like after politics. So I was able to tell him. But he was saying, well, look, there was Grania Shogia, who was a high profile candidate, and John.
Very much, yeah.
Yeah, but John was a hard-working county councillor, a good, solid guy, good values, and it was nice to see him getting in, And also, I'd have to say, I was delighted to see that in Kerry, Norma Foley got elected, but she actually brought in Michael Cahill with her. And I would know Michael. And I know Michael from Muir, we would have been good buddies, and when I was on the campaign trail, and indeed he went for the Senate a number of times, and he was close to John O'Donoghue at the stage when John O'Donoghue was there, and would have put a lot of work in over the years, over the last 30 odd years and plus.
Yeah.
And it was nice to see him being elected. And I think he'll be a good, solid TD now for Kerry, you know.
Yeah. I thought it was an extraordinary performance by Norma Foley, who had been, to be perfectly honest, a very controversial Minister for Education.
Yes. Yeah, and also Kerry has had a, and Kerry has had a habit of changing its Fianna Fáil TDs.
Oh, yeah, Kerry's ruthless.
Election,
yeah, Kerry's ruthless.
So,
not as ruthless as Wexford, which disposes of junior ministers.
That's right.
Savagely.
Yeah, we went every election, junior minister, all gone.
With the result that a TD
resigned
as a junior minister.
Ministry afterwards.
It was regarded as a curse in Wexford. The result that stood out for me was, I suppose, because I know him to start off with, Paul Lawless in Mayo for Intu.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't a madly great election for Intu, but they did double their representation. And Paul's election was extraordinary because it shows the power of the transfer and of looking for transfers. Paul had 4,400 votes on the first count, pretty much counted out. You know, he was 7th in a 5-seater. And every single elimination, Paul was picking up votes. Everyone that went out, no matter who you were voting for, you were putting Paul number 2 or 3 or 4. You were giving him something.
There's no doubt in the proportional representation system we have, transfers are absolutely important.
Yes.
And we had a TD in our constituency one time, and he had no interest and would tell people, you know, if they were offering him number 2, he was highly insulted. But eventually caught up with him. And that does happen, you know.
Fianna Fáil TD, as far as I remember.
And you do need transfers.
You do. Well, in Paul's situation,
and be grateful for them. And I mean, I have to say, for me, during the time I was in politics, it particularly applicable in Senate elections.
Yes,
transfers are absolutely crucial.
Now, I want to
give you number 2 or number 3. Take it with welcoming arms,
take the arm off of the shoulder. I want to come to the Senate election because most people aren't. You know, you've been in the Senate. Unless you've been around politics, you won't know how the Senate election works. It's a mystery. It seems to happen, but you don't know anything about it. How does it work, Jim? For instance, how are people nominated?
Okay, well, that's the first issue. There's 2. There's the Oireachtas panel.
Yes.
And then there's the nominating bodies panel.
Okay.
And nominating panels are a list of bodies who have the right to nominate 1 or 2 candidates to run for the Senate.
To their particular
panel. Let's say on the industrial commercial panel, for example, I was president of the Irish Road Hall Association at one stage, and we had a nomination to that panel. So that was in our gift to give that. And what you would have is prior to the Senate election, maybe immediately after the general election, you'd be approached by people who were running for the Senate, who wanted to run for the Senate, looking for a nomination. Now, they would be writing to a whole lot of other people as well.
Because they try anything for a nomination.
Correct. Now, they then have to qualify. You know, they have to have some connection to the panel.
Where we saw a problem with that was the Senate by-election, where Fine Gael nominated a candidate who turned out to have, for the Arts and Culture panel, who turned out to have no connection, but they had, rather stupidly, nominated him to the board of the Museum of Modern Art in order to give him a connection, which actually highlighted it. And he ended up being beaten quite badly. I think Ger Crowell got the seat, the independent.
That's right, he did, and that was he's held on to it very well.
He's held on to it,
he has.
Well done
but
him.
Then, so that's the first thing. And generally what happens is that the Oireachtas then will hold back, the parties will hold back to see who has what they call an outside nomination from the nominating bodies. Once you have that, though, you're a candidate. And then the Oireachtas panel will sit down and they'll see who will they then add to that. And that used in my time, used to be by way of vote by the parliamentary party. So the first time I ran, sorry?
I don't think that currently operates.
No,
I think
and
it
it
tends
should
to be
operate.
the leadership. Yeah.
Correct. And that broke in 2011 when we had a very small parliamentary party, and the leader took it upon himself to do it. And that doesn't sit well, I think, constitutionally.
Yeah.
Because if you've got to go through the parliamentary party, well, there's an assessment and evaluation there.
It should be through the parliamentary party.
It should be through the parliamentary party, like,
Yeah.
you know. And I recall, I mean, the first time I ran, I didn't really want to go, and I was persuaded to put my name forward. And I did it on the basis that I wouldn't get the nomination from the parliamentary party, because there was outgoing senators, there was, I think there might have been outgoing TDs, and there certainly
there'd also be
number.
up and coming TDs in places
Absolutely, there was certainly
problematic for the party.
There were certainly candidates, councillors, who had ran for the general election and hadn't been elected, so there were kind of defeated candidates whom they'd be looking to put in place for the next time. But anyway, I got through it, and that was it. Like, you know, I spent the next 19 years in the Senate.
That was a long career as a senator.
It was. Yeah. But then an interesting thing happened. I ran on the Oireachtas, you know, I would inquire and say, look, do you want me to run the inside or the outside? So they ran me on the inside again, 2002. And in 2007, I wasn't sure, you know, so they said to me, look, hold on and we'll see what way it's shaping up, and we'll let you know. But he want to go the inside outside. So I lined up an outside nomination for myself. And I said, hold it and I'll give you a ring to let you know if I need it. I was very honest with them and said, look, if
because they're valuable.
Inside, I'll run on the inside. So anyway, they came back to me to say, look, they wanted me to run on the inside. But there was a mix-up in the office, and by the time they got back to the nominating body, they had put the nomination in. So I said, that's okay. Give a ring to the Senate office and tell them withdraw it.
Yeah.
So I rang, or they rang for me. The office rang, and they were told, no, you can't withdraw it.
You made it.
The nominating body puts in a nomination. That's it.
It can't be withdrawn.
No, can't.
That's interesting.
So I ended up running on the outside, which actually suited me the following time, which was 2011.
Because you wouldn't have gotten a nomination from the leader.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, now we know how people are nominated. Who votes?
Voters are the county councillors, the Oireachtas members and the county councillors. So
now, which Oireachtas members?
The Oireachtas members will be all the TDs, the incoming TDs.
It's the new ones, not the old ones.
No, all the TDs that were elected because the old ones are gone.
They're gone now.
The 29th of November, all those TDs will have a Senate vote.
Okay.
And they'll have 5 Senate votes because there's 5 panels.
Ah, yes.
And they will, all the councillors then will have one as well. So you end up having to canvass and go right around the country. It's an enormous
That's a
campaign,
huge job.
You know. Oh, yeah. It will take you to do it all. Will take you, you know, about 5 weeks on the road continuously, more or less continuously every day.
So it's a costly game.
Oh, it is. It's an expensive. Oh, it is. Yeah, it's an expensive game. Yeah.
This isn't a cheap election.
No, it's not. No, you're spreading a lot of CO2 as well, of course. So, but
Zoom meetings won't cut it.
But I mean, I'll tell you what it is. I actually came back. I remember after some of the elections, and I would have said to ministers, look, it should be a compulsory campaign for cabinet ministers, because you get a tremendous feedback of what's happening right around the length and breadth of Ireland, what the needs are, what the issues are, and you come back very well informed as to what you should be pursuing, you know. So from the point of view of democratic exercise,
you see Ireland in a way that you will never see it any other way.
Oh no, sure. Well, you do, but like it's fleeting glance, because you're on the phone, you're trying to get to the next guy.
Yeah. You still see a lot more.
You do, and you make a lot of friends on it too. I have to say, like, you know, you meet the nicest of people going around that. And the thing about it is that most of them, you know, involved in politics, understand completely what you're about, because they've gone through their own elections. Yeah. So, like, you know, there's kind of an empathy there anyway from the start.
They're not like the uninformed voter that has decided to hate every politician and everybody running.
That's right.
You know, these are people
with
a sympathy
for the system.
Correct.
But to do it over the 4 weeks, 5 weeks out and 4 weeks out, the problem is that they could well have 100 canvassers between the time you see them and the
really
election.
Difficult. Yeah.
Oftentimes they'll have forgotten that they promised you anything, like, even though they might have tended doing a number one. But unless they're very systematic about it and make a note or whatever else.
Pin you to the fridge. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't think of that now, that they will see far, because in a general election, if you saw 2 canvassers in Ireland now, I got canvassed once during this general election.
Me too. And 2 was the only one that came to my door.
Yeah. These were Michael Doyle's people, but they were told that despite the fact that it had been a Fine Gael household since the foundation of the party, there would be no votes ever again for Fine Gael in this household. And I was...
That's to do with the Kenny abortion.
It was, yes. I had been the director of elections for the county as well. But I said, and I knew the chap, I recognised him, but I said, I'm really sorry, there are no votes for Fine Gael here. I had calmed down. I had gone. I had threatened that I would treat Fine Gael or Green Party canvassers as trespassers. So I didn't do that. So I suppose that was mild enough. But I had forgotten that 100 or so canvassers coming to that's an awful burden actually.
Oh, it's a big
because
burden.
they're coming to your house. They're not coming to an office.
They are, and invariably you learn as you do the various campaigns as well. That like the one thing I learned was, the mobile phone, when it came in, was ideal. You could ring, say you're there, because you might be going out to Clifton and maybe the person's in Galway.
Yeah.
So you ring, and
because invariably these are county councillors with lives and busy schedules.
Correct. But I found in the last week of the campaign that you didn't ring, because if you did, they'd answer and you say, Jim, there's no need to come. Look, I know you well, And of course, you don't feel that that's a canvas, but they're so browned off.
Eyeballed them.
They're so browned off with meeting people,
It must be really hard on their families, 100 people turning up looking for votes at the door over 5 weeks. That's 20 people a week.
It is.
And it's probably not evenly spread. You probably don't get few enough the first week.
No. It'll come in waves, as it usually does.
It was kind of, Daddy, is this ever going to stop?
Oh, that's right, And I always remember here there was Trashonan, and maybe we'll go back to the general election after this, but Trashonan used to come with her sister.
Yes.
And they always brought sweets for the kids. And of course,
that's a good move.
Want to be about Tras, Dad, make sure you vote for Tras. We don't have to go out the door.
I knew a Donegal County councillor who told me that he knew he had problems with alcohol, so he had sworn off it. And he was going across the bridge in Limerick, and he looked into the back of the car. He was driving an estate, and it was full to the roof with bottles of brandy and whiskey for county councillors. And he took a glance into the back of the car, and 3 weeks later, with the election over, he only had one shoe. He had no money, and he had to borrow the money to ring his brother. And he was in Cork. He topped the poll on his panel, but never got another vote. And I can tell this story because I'm sure with the age of the man that he's long dead. But I always thought it was a solitary lesson in elections and drinking.
No doubt. No,
what do you expect to happen? Can you, what should we watch for in this Senate elections?
Well, I think the Count Corda's position on Wednesday will be interesting. And I'm really interested to see what Fine Gael are going to do. Whether they'll support Verona Murphy or, whether they'll vote one of the Fianna Fáil candidates.
We could get another president of the Road Hauliers Association. Rona Shea was one of your successors in the job, wasn't she?
That's right, she was. She was actually, yes, she was. But it'll be interesting because I know that Sean Farrell had a good few people encouraging him to run again.
Yeah. And
at a time when he was wondering, should he or shouldn't he run for the Count Corda's job, Simon Harris approached him as Taoiseach and said, look, you should consider going again for this because we're going to have a lot of new TDs probably elected this time.
Yeah.
And, we need somebody with experience that's going to keep the house running.
And he was a very good Count Corda.
He's a very good Count Corda. But it'll be interesting to see whether that will now hold up, or whether, the prospect of placating the independence. I don't know how they've come up with this. And actually, very interestingly, one of Sean's nominees for the position is who? Rona Murphy.
I don't know.
Rona Murphy.
It's an extraordinary move. Normally the government wants the opposition to provide the Ceann Comhairle.
Particularly in a tight.
Yeah, it's one vote down.
In a tight doll. But
yeah,
I suppose the way they're looking, the way they're looking at it is, even though I think, Sean was very good, as you say, now, of course, your own county man, John McGuinness, is a candidate for it as well.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And Michael Mylan in Cork, I think, is rumoured to be one, and then Brendan Smith maybe. So it'll be just interesting to see how that pans out,
that, I mean, John has a checkered record. He has not always been the most popular man with the Fianna Fáil hierarchy. He has been brutally critical at times. However, as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, he did extraordinary work. He really turned that committee into one of the most powerful investigative bodies in the state. And people tend to forget that now. On the simple line of everything is money. It is all money. He made everything the business of the Public Accounts Committee, which allowed him to talk to Maurice McCabe.
Yes. And he has he's a good business acumen.
He has,
and good business experience. And I think that shone through, in that role, as it did, I think, in his ministerial position as well when he was there. But he does have a contrarian side to him. I like John. He's a good friend.
I do too. I'm not friendly with him. I know him just to speak to him, but I like him, and I have found him courageous on all the great issues of the last couple of years.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. Yeah. He will stand up to all of that, and certainly won't be one of those politicians that will try to ingratiate himself into the leader's favour in order to get a position.
Not in the least.
But he does deserve to be recognised, not by this, I would think, but he deserves to be recognised, for the fact that he's led, not for the first time, 3 seats in Kilkenny.
They got 3 seats in 2007 when John and Liam Aylward, or not Liam, the late Bobby, God rest him, were the poll toppers. And by the way, on that day, the 3 Fianna Fáil TDs were elected first.
That's right.
One after another.
That's right. That's right.
No credit to the extraordinarily poor performance of Phil Hogan in that situation. But then Phil was never very good at electoral politics. So what should we be looking for? Leaving out the Ceann Comhairle's position, what should we be looking for in the Senate election right now? We'll come back to the Dáil.
Okay.
Is there anything going to happen that will be interesting?
In the Senate election, I mean, it'll be fairly obvious, I think, that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael will probably get a majority in it, because the Taoiseach's 11 nominees will obviously... Well,
of course, the Senate is designed so the government
ensure a majority. And that's why that provision is in the Constitution. In order for the government to have.
In fact, it's one of the things that weakens the Senate.
Sorry?
It's one of the things that weakens the Senate. The Senate isn't capable of dumping a government.
And it was one of the things that I used to argue about in the Senate. We should do away with the 11 nominees in any sort of electoral reform for the Senate. Because I remember going there as president of the Roll Hall Association when there was a minority government. I remember when it changed during Fianna Fáil's term. So the 11 were put in by Albert Reynolds. And then that government collapsed and Dick Spring went across the floor.
That's right.
To John Bruton. And they ended up in a minority in the Senate. You could go and you could talk to independents and others there. And I thought the Senate worked well because it was consensus.
It did.
And I think that's the role.
We forget that an attempt was made to abolish the Senate, which was rigorously rejected by the Irish people, and rightly. I campaigned and you campaigned against it at the time. But the Senate has several times over the last number of years provided a second look at legislation or at issues in a much better way than the Dáil itself did.
Oh yeah, it does. I recall actually from 2002 to 2007, we had nobody with legal qualifications in our group in the Shannon.
Yes.
And therefore, Bertie was looking to appoint a government spokesman, and generally it would be a solicitor or a barrister or something there. So anyway, I kind of got a nod that I might be going to ask, and I said, no, don't ask me to do that, because it's a very, very onerous position. But anyway, I got the call, so I did it. And
you enlist, you serve.
For the period, for the 5 years. And I think he wanted me there because he felt maybe with the other parties I might work better. Yeah. And McDowell was the Minister for Justice, Michael McDowell.
The famously abrasive Michael McDowell.
Absolutely, but I got on very well with Michael, and I had my own views on things and wouldn't be, slow about articulating in the Senate and things like that to him, But he always, he'd always entertain him, go through, and very good at the debates. But I was asking him one day, he introduced most of his legislation in the Shannon, which was contrary to what a lot of ministers would do. First to bring it to
that was different, and
then send it was. And I said to him one day, I said, Michael, I said, I asked him, I said, Michael, look, I noted, I said, we noticed that we talked about it, that a lot of your legislation is introduced in the Shannon. And just wondering, why do you do that? And he said to me, Jim, look, he said, if I bring my legislation to the Shannon at the start, I know I'm going to get a good debate. I know it'll be well analysed, go through it. And I'll come out of the Shannon much better informed about the detail of my own piece of legislation than I will in the Dáil. I bring it into the Dáil and it becomes a political football. The issues are gone out the window. And it's all about scoring political points. So he said, I bring it here first, then I can amend it. And then I go to the Dáil and I'm completely on top of it. So I thought it was a very honest kind of appraisal of.
You're after reminding me of a story, because I think it's worth telling, that John Paul Phelan told me. It was Seamus Brennan was the relevant minister, and John Paul had made some intervention on a bill. I would have to talk to him to know now what it was, but the important point was he made some intervention proposing, shouldn't the bill do this, and or this particular thing, but it was voted down. The government wasn't accepting an amendment from the opposition. But 24 hours later, he got a call to come to Seamus Brennan's office. And Brennan says that proposal you made, I'm amending the bill to include it. It's a good proposal. You have 24 hours now before it's to tell people. Because Brennan believed that people who contributed should get something, should get
recognition for it.
Get recognition. He was actually, in that sense, an extraordinary minister by Irish standards. And it's often forgotten how good he was.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. But I remember Michael McDowell bringing in a bill to us. It was about the joint policing committees.
Yes.
And which I thought was a nice piece of legislation, but it was the county managers, people in the region in charge of public body. There are no councillors on it.
Yeah. So there was no democratic oversight at all. Yeah.
So I argued against this in the second stage debate and said, look, I wasn't in favour of this, that it should be, councillors should definitely be part and parcel of it. So when I sat down, he said to me, or maybe at the end of the debate, he said, Jimmy, he said, I agree with what you've said, actually. But he said, I've got word down from the Department of the Environment that they don't want councillors on
it. That's an extraordinary reason for a minister not to put them on it.
If I get an amendment, he said, do you want to put in an amendment to it? He said to me. And I said, well, look, it might seem already up if I, as government spokesman, put in an amendment.
Yes, I was going to point this out.
What I'll do is I'll draft the amendment.
Yeah.
And I'll get Maurice Cummins, who is the opposition spokesman for Justice, to table it.
Yes.
Maurice can propose it. I'll support it, and then you can accept it. So it'll look more,
And the department is stuck with it.
And that's exactly what we did.
Isn't that?
And that's why the councillors are now part
on the joint policing.
The chairman generally comes from the county council as well.
Well, just on that was an extraordinary move. Can you imagine that happening today, where a government spokesman in the Senate would get up and publicly oppose the bill being forwarded by his own government? It just wouldn't happen, Jim.
No, and it's a pity because, this groupthink has taken over in a whole lot of areas.
Yes.
To the detriment of society generally, I have to say, and to political level, or to policy evolution as well. You know, I mean, it doesn't.
Policy evolution needs a lot of debate.
It does.
Doesn't
It
happen
does.
in
It does.
groupthink.
And you need different views and different opinions. And then when you put them all together, you know, you have the best prospect of coming up with the right decision.
Something that'll sort of work. To come back to the Dáil, what do you see happening over the next couple of weeks?
I think ultimately they'll come down to, I think Labour and Social Democrats will probably at some stage leave the field. I mean, they'll be slow to do it or to be seen to do it.
Yeah.
But they'll have to find some way of getting out. And I don't think that Labour will win without Social Democrats.
They've made it, Ivana Bacik has made it clear that she won't.
Yeah.
But the Social Democrats have made it clear they won't go in with Labour. So it's...
So I think it'll be done with the regional independents.
Okay. And how many of those are there, do you know?
There's 9 now.
Okay.
On the regional independents. And maybe, I don't know whether they'll go beyond that or not. I'd be inclined to. There'll be other independents who are outside of that group, you know.
Yeah.
That would be fairly okay, you know. I mean, what you want really are people that you can deal with and that will stay the course. You don't want people jumping at every issue, like, you know.
Yeah, I'm out.
I always remember.
I'm
I
out.
always remember when my first time being elected was in 1997.
Yeah.
And it was very shaky. It was a minority government, and we had 4 or 5 independents. And then Ray Burke resigned his seat in his ministry.
Yes.
And we were even in more trouble.
Yeah.
So it didn't look like something that was going to go to course. But I remember talking to Bertie one day, we were a bit into it. And I'd observed actually Jackie Healy-Rae. Jackie was being cornered by Charlie Bird and others in the media, you know. And I remember
they
one
thought
day
they were cornering them.
Yeah, and I was over in Buzzwells.
Yeah.
And Jackie was about to be interviewed, and Charlie schooling him on what he was going to ask him, but more importantly, what Jackie should say in answer to the question, which Jackie was doing.
So sorry, anyway, that's just too funny.
But anyway, I remember Bertie saying to me, you know, he said, oh no, he said, look, it's going well with the independents. He said, other than Jackie, he said, I've had to sit down with Jackie and say, Jackie, look, you have all these national bodies getting onto you, and you're going to be coming to me with all sorts of lost causes that I'm not going to be able to do anything about.
Yeah.
And they won't get you 1 vote in Kerry anyway. If you can concentrate on Kerry and on the issues there, we can deliver to you. We can't solve every kind of group in the country's problems. That just
we can solve Kerry.
So because Jackie changed tack, concentrated on Kerry, and the whole thing settled down, and everything sailed for the full 5 years.
It did. But people forget just how consummate a politician Bertie Ahern was. He was the equivalent of Blair. I mean, Blair was a political superstar, and people forget that. But Bertie Ahern was a political superstar here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The confluence of both of them serving at the same time was actually very good, was extraordinarily good for the country.
So much happened.
And for the peace process and everything.
So much happened.
And they had a very good rapport. I mean, I recall going over to Newcastle for a game, Manchester United in Newcastle. And Bertie was on the plane. There wasn't too many on the plane. It was a small flight going into Teesside or somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
And I know that he was going because Tony Kettle was a good friend of mine in the Senate. And a very good friend of Bertie's actually, and he was going with him. So I was chatting to them on the plane, and they were heading to meet Tony Blair. He was going to the match as well.
He was going to the match as well.
He would have
compared that with the shambles that Leo Varadkar and Simon Harris reduced Anglo-Irish relations to from the Brexit, in the run-up to the Brexit vote and after it. And they quite literally went out of their way to insult, antagonise and annoy both the British government and the Unionists in Northern Ireland in a way that was unthinkable in Bertie Ahern's time.
Yeah, but you don't have you didn't have any Blair on the other side of the equation there.
Oh no, you didn't
either. I mean,
you certainly didn't have a Bertie.
The mother of all parliaments became the mother of all jokes, like, you know.
It did, it became a shambles. But we didn't have to behave the way they behaved.
No, you have to be diplomatic, all right. There's no doubt about that.
Which, of course, before we get back into the government, that being diplomatic, that brings us to the extraordinary position that, as of now, Ireland is the only EU country that will not have an Israeli embassy. They're closing the embassy.
they are, yeah.
Extraordinary failure of
I have
Irish
to say that,
diplomacy.
I mean, you'd have to have sympathy for what happened in Israel with Hamas attacking innocent people and all that. I mean, absolutely shameful.
And kidnapping and keeping to this
and
day
still
over
have,
100 people, including a
correct.
child who has had 2/3 of his life now
Yes,
in Hamas
that's right.
captivity.
Yeah, yeah. But I have to say, Israel have totally overreacted, and there is a suspicion that Netanyahu was protecting himself by keeping the war going. But there comes a stage where you have to say, look, enough is enough. And
He hasn't the
the
hostages
innocent
and no
population
prospect
of
of
Gaza,
getting them.
the innocent population of Gaza have been absolutely afflicted with what's happened there. And I've been in some of the refugee camps in Lebanon and in Jordan, on the Palestinians. I remember one day, people living in houses with half the wall gone, things like this, you know what I mean? You can look into the bedroom, whatever else, and they're living in these kind of conditions. And I asked somebody, how long is this camp here for? And they told me since 1948.
Yeah.
So there has to be, and there's a great onus on the Americans, I think.
Well, there has to be a solution, but
right.
there also has to be a risk that there has to be, Hamas refuses to acknowledge the state of Israel even exists.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
we're getting very close to that as well, but
any
that's a whole other
solution
story.
has to have the protection of Israel.
Yeah.
As part of the security of Israel as part of it. But I think there also has to be, I mean, it's got to the stage where the two-state solution, is it achievable from the point of view of what they're building, the settlements and that on? So I'd be critical of the path that the Israelis have taken. And I've met some of them in the Knesset and that, and very domineering.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not people that are prepared to compromise. That was my
It's very hard to compromise
experience.
with people whose answer is, well, what do you want? We want to kill you.
No, but I mean, the
How
way
do
they
you
treat people
compromise with that?
No, but the way they treat people on the West Bank, Hamas now is a different story. But on the West Bank, like the Palestinians there, the manner in which they're treated was absolutely extraordinarily bad. And I could see that what they were doing could only lead to one road, and that was to radicalize a lot of them.
Yeah.
Whereas, there was much more amenable partners to talk to on the West Bank. So I don't know, and I think the manner in which they've moved on Lebanon now as well, or not on Lebanon, but on Syria, you just wonder. But they have the military might, and obviously they'll continue to use it. But I'd have to say that I wouldn't be giving them any marks for what they're doing,
Yeah, we'd have to disagree on that, because I think the fall of
I thought we might.
Yeah, I think the fall of the Assad regime has been great.
Iran I agree with that fully. I agree with that.
Iran is cut off from its terror proxies in Lebanon now. There's a chance for Lebanese Christians to actually take back some of the power.
I've met Christians in Israel as well.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be enamored with how they were being treated.
No, I agree. Yeah, I'd agree with you. But I think an extraordinary situation for Ireland, that we're the only EU country without an Israeli embassy, and I think that's down to the extraordinary behaviour of Harris in the last while. And I have to say as well, Martin's bizarre intervention in the South African case, where he wants the genocide convention reinterpreted. These are other issues. The issue is what's going to happen. Is there going to be a rotating Taoiseach?
I don't see the regional independent group taking, I don't think that will be make or break point.
I don't think it'll be a problem, and rightly so.
I think they'll end up forming a government.
Okay. Will there be a rotating Taoiseach?
I think there will be, yes.
Okay.
Now, whether it's 3-2, 3 years, 2 years, would seem to be equitable, but whether it's that or the 2.5, I don't think that'll be a breaking point.
Yeah.
And
which end will they take?
I think Fianna Fáil will take. I think because of Micheál Martin's age and that, he'll take the first term. I think he will.
He'll go now. Yeah.
I think he will. Yeah. I believe he will. Yeah. I believe he will. And that might lead then to a change of leadership in Fianna Fáil at the end of that.
At the end of his 3 years, he'll be willing to step down.
Perhaps.
Yeah. Well, if that happens, I mean, I know it's a long way out.
There's
a
a
big
bit of Charlie
hypothetical.
Haughey about him, though, you know. In China, these leaders go on forever, into their 80s and 90s.
Charlie was taken out at the height of his power at a point where his government had provided the most extraordinary basis ever for Irish prosperity. He had reduced.
Right.
I keep reminding people that
That's very
Fianna
fair
Fáil.
of you to say as a Fine Gael.
I recognise my past errors. That's all I
Yes.
can say. Charlie Haughey's government reduced I think by 4 percentage points, the old middle rate of tax. And in Albert Reynolds' first budget, that middle layer of tax, that middle rate, became the top rate with the abolition of the old top rate of tax. It was an extraordinary time in Ireland where
But
they basically laid the basis of every prosperity we have now.
But I mean, what Fine Gael and Labour did in that government from 82 to 87, you know,
it was a disaster.
Absolutely destroyed the economy. I mean, any hope of any sort of recovery, they made sure it wouldn't happen.
Oh, they killed it. I mean, it was.
What was the top rate? Was it 60%?
60% at a point, yeah. It is shocking, absolutely shocking stuff. You had a situation where it was Churchill's maxim that you can't taxing your way out of recession is like standing in a bucket and trying to lift it. But Garrett Fitzgerald kept trying to lift that bucket.
Extraordinary for a man that was an economist.
They're the worst people you could find. Yeah, you know, economists can be the worst people you know because they'd all been trained in that Keynesian nonsense. That's all they understood were little graphs and.
But I don't think Charlie ever got enough credit.
No, he didn't.
For his contribution generally
in the least.
to Ireland, you know what I mean? And I mean, I know the tribunals and all that, but unfortunately, the tribunals themselves became compromised by the length of time that they were taking.
They did.
To reach their conclusions.
They did, yeah.
Which put them in an absolutely unenviable position because they would have been excoriated by the media if they'd come with anything less than full condemnation of what they were investigating.
We had gone to a point where we forgot the maxim that justice denied is justice denied.
It's justice denied. That couldn't have been
a tribunal that goes on 10 years is ridiculous. It makes no sense. You can't do that.
I used to drive home for my first term or two in the Shannon on a Thursday evening, listening to Vincent Brown on radio. And he used to play back, and he'd have actors doing the pieces that went on in the tribunal today.
Yes. High drama.
Yeah. I mean, the benign, you know, questions that were being asked. And it was all gathering time, and young barristers gone in that were becoming millionaires overnight. I mean, it was a scandal in itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, probably bigger than anything they were investigating.
In the end, the tribunals cost far more than any of the bribery had ever cost us.
Oh, yeah.
And it eclipsed Charlie Haughey's enormous contribution, both financially and culturally. That's what people forget. The current government, there's nobody in the current government with a scintilla of his cultural knowledge and depth. I can remember, you said you talked to Jim Gibbons. Jim had been in school with my father. So they were the same. And I ended up in Jim's house, not through my father, but I ended up in Jim's house through friends one night, very late. I think it was in 1986. So there was a divorce referendum on. And I know we argued it all night.
Right.
And Jim was extraordinary because he was so articulate and so well versed in the art. But more than that, he could quote reams of modern Irish poetry that I had never even heard of. You know, he had every modern Irish poet, every new poet, he bought their work, read it, and because he read it, he knew it. But the Jim Gibbons you saw, you know, on television was this dour, sour.
That's right. Yes.
He looked sideways at the camera, you know.
That's right.
Instead, he was this extraordinarily articulate, learned, capable man, you know.
Yeah.
There's nobody like that there now. There just isn't.
No, there's probably not. Yeah, there's quite a few good people there, but unfortunately, as I said earlier, you know, we're into the year of career politicians, and that often comes without conviction on anything. You know, I always remember one of my colleagues in the Oireachtas, he was in the Dáil, and he'd say to me, Jim, I wish I could find somebody that had a conviction about anything, and I don't mind what the conviction is about, as long as it's a conviction that they hold.
The
and
absolute
will
rule in
stand by
Irish
it,
politics
otherwise.
now is not to have
Yeah.
convictions, not to have convictions. You must
Yeah.
not have convictions.
Yeah.
You know, they're
But
seen
that's
as an
sad.
impediment to progress.
Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah. Now, you
I
must
mean,
be
I
well
know a
in
fella,
with the NGOs.
I'm not going to name him now, but
Yeah.
I know a young man who strongly pro-life,
Yeah.
got elected to the Dáil, I think he's been back a couple of times, and now he's voting for abortion and he's voting for euthanasia.
Yeah.
Discovered in the last, you know.
Now,
Like,
you've raised an issue there.
just, yeah,
You've raised an issue there. I believe we are about
yes,
to get a euthanasia bill.
yes.
Are we, do you think?
I don't know. I think the fact that some of the hard left have gone.
Yeah.
Gino Kenny, I think, was
Gino
sponsoring
Kenny
that,
lost his seat. Yeah.
and he
was a
lost his
proposer.
seat, yes.
Yeah. No,
And I think
Kenny's bill was
they're down
Kenny's
to
bill was a
3.
stalking horse.
And also, I'd be
Nothing
hopeful
more.
that within the regional group, there's 4 or 5 that I'd identify
Yeah.
that would be very strongly, you know,
Yeah.
have life values.
Yeah.
And I'd be hoping that they'd put a stop to any of that kind of nonsense, you know. And I mean, there's no need for Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael to be getting into that.
There's
None at
absolutely
all.
no need, but also it's extra, because my fear with all of these, as I've always said, is that we don't have a debate. What we have is a
Yeah.
finger pointing exercise. You know,
Yeah.
the only people opposing this are hardcore Catholics. So the only people, you know, there
It's
are
not.
really good safety
Yeah.
reasons not to have
Oh, yeah.
doctors killing people, because the people that are
Absolutely.
going to get killed are going to be the old, the poor, the lonely, and the vulnerable.
But it
It's
also
not
changes the culture of the doctors. You know, I mean,
absolutely.
if you're in a
Yeah.
profession that it's okay to kill,
Then
why
it
should you
becomes
go to your way to save somebody's
safe,
life?
and it
You know what I
becomes
mean?
normalized.
You know,
You know,
that's
when
right.
it comes in first, you wouldn't expect there'll be a lot of
And that
doctors who
could be
do it.
subconsciously, like, I'm not saying that that would be
No,
done
no.
consciously, but subconsciously that affects people.
But we also forget that legislation affects the culture of medicine, that as time goes on, there's less and less reason, because, you know, would you not just take the needle, love? You know, why would you invest time, effort, and money in saving somebody? There's an alternative. They can die, and death becomes an acceptable option. And this is a really bad. Effectively, we're looking at turning every doctor into Harold Shipman, Dr. Harold Shipman, the English mass murderer.
Yeah.
And this is not where we should be.
No, no, not at all. I couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah. Oh, we would be as one on this.
But hopefully, you know, but I think the government will be formed probably sometime in January. I heard speculation it could be the 22nd of January. I think they'll be anxious to do it before the American inauguration.
That's the 20th.
That's the 24th, I think, is it? 20?
No, I thought it was the 20th. I think they have to have it on the 20th. Yeah, I think it's constitutionally now on the 20th.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Could be wrong.
You know. So I think when I mean, they should be able to decide on policy reasonably quickly. I mean, it's a continuum really of what was there, presumably, and what they were doing with probably some new issues. Maybe to get greater emphasis in that, you know. So it shouldn't be taking too long.
Are we going to see a hate speech bill in this government?
Well, I hope not.
Yeah.
I hope not. I mean, that would be a retrograde step. I mean, it was like, I'd love to see the repeal of that legislation that was brought in.
Yeah.
To oppose, you know, people praying outside or meeting outside
the zones, the so-called safety zones. Yeah, because prayer is dangerous.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I saw some. Was it in England or Northern Ireland? I think some woman.
Northern Ireland in the last couple of days.
She was sued. I mean, that's extraordinary. Like, you know.
And we're having it in Britain as well. Silent prayer in Britain is banned.
That's right. Yeah. I mean,
if you just stand there, they can conjecture that you're praying. You know, are you praying? And if you said you were silently, if they even conjecture you're praying, you can be convicted.
Yeah.
They know what's going on in your head.
All these,
that's extraordinary.
Yeah, all these self-proclaimed liberals are so illiberal. You know?
Yes, illiberal. You know, wander off into the underbrush again. Because we've mentioned the United Kingdom, Starmer's government, what do you think how they're doing? Or have you paid them any attention at all?
I paid them some attention, but kind of, you know, from a distance, if you like, you know.
Yeah.
I have a daughter working over there. And she's concerned about what they're going to do about taxation and pensions and things. But obviously, they've inherited a bit of an economic mess. So
well, they
that
claim
has
they
to be
have.
tightened
There's
up.
no great deal of evidence that they have. They claim they have.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
There
I think
hasn't
the
been a
fiscal
Labour
position,
government. There
the
hasn't been a
fiscal
government.
position isn't great.
Yeah.
But no, I think they're doing okay. He comes across. There's less drama about the whole thing, which I think is good.
That wouldn't be hard.
I mean, the Tories went through a tremendously traumatic period with the change of prime ministers and everything that went with it, and Boris Johnson.
2, 3, 4, 5 prime ministers actually in the
amazing.
term.
Yeah, extraordinary. Extraordinary, like.
So they're averaging a prime minister a year, and some years a lot shorter.
Yeah, but I think overall, Western democracies generally need to be careful, because I think there's a dearth of quality leadership.
So if you're cycling through it, it's bad.
And and I think that's dangerous for democracy.
How do we improve the amount of quality leadership, Jim, in politics?
Difficult. You really need, I don't know, I've been thinking about it a little bit. And I remember being away somewhere at some meeting of an organization I was involved in. And this Christian Democrat from the Netherlands was there, whom I'd known. I'd met him a few times.
Yeah.
And I was asking him, I said, are you running again?
Yeah.
And you see, I knew the election was coming up. And he said, no. And I said, where aren't you running? He said, I'm not allowed. I said, why? He said, our party have a rule that once you've gone past 12 years, you can't go again.
Ooh.
So there was a turnover. And he was a very good, able fellow now. I wouldn't agree with everything, all his outlook on things, but I mean, he was a good, able politician. And I just said, is there a need to do something like that, or to get more young people in, or I don't know. But it throws good people out as well, which is the other issue. Experience.
That would be my worry. Yeah. That would be my worry there.
Yeah.
But you think it might encourage people to come up the ranks?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, sometimes I thought maybe abolishing the whip, and I think it doesn't need to be there on everything. But then when you look at some of the free votes in the Dáil and euthanasia and abortion and various other things, you wonder,
Yeah. And of course, we didn't have free votes on some of the most serious issues of conscience.
No.
They whipped some of the most serious issues of conscience, which was extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, we got, even though I wasn't enthusiastic about doing away with about giving the free whip on the abortion issue in 2013, because I felt I had a majority within the parliamentary party to oppose it. And then people who were looking for abortion would have been whipped voting against it. But in any way,
well, Fine Gael whipped us and whipped us.
Fine Gael whipped it, they did. And I was so sorry for people that were so strongly pro-life who went with the whip. And I couldn't understand it. I had already agreed within Fianna Fáil before we agreed on the free whip with a number. I had a good handful, I had 9 or 10. And we said, right, we're a blocking minority. Thinking that, like, once he finds out that number will oppose it, regardless of what decision is made, that
he can't whip it.
Stop him. But it didn't stop him. He kept going until eventually he discovered and was told, do you realize that you're going to be whipped into opposing the legislation? And only then did he take breath and say, oh,
free vote.
Well, maybe Michael McGrath's suggestion of a free vote might be the right way to go. That's what happened.
I have no sympathy with the Fine Gael people who voted for it for one reason. It's not because they were forced to vote. That was awful. But because when the men and women who voted against were expelled, not one of them said a word. They sat on their hands at the parliamentary party meeting and allowed their colleagues to be expelled from the party, that in a way that would never have happened, that wouldn't even have happened earlier under Kenny. It was, and for that reason, it's because they stayed silent when Paul Bradford and others were expelled. I am
They
absolutely.
they were very brave. They
They
were very
were.
brave.
Peter
Actually,
Matthews, Peter Fitzpatrick,
that's right. Peter Matthews, lovely fellow. You know Peter
lovely
very
man,
well. Yeah.
lovely man. You know,
Billy Timmins, all of those. And
Billy, yeah,
unfortunately, they all lost their seats, which was
they did.
tragic.
Yes, they did.
You know,
But huge investment was put into them losing their seat. I
it
mean,
was.
in Lucinda's case, Kate O'Connell got the entire backing of the party and more
Of course.
in order to force Lucinda out.
Yeah.
But anyway,
right.
that's politics.
She didn't get in the last election.
She did not get in the last election. There
No,
were
but
all
she didn't
sorts.
get the support of the party in
And
her last election either.
she didn't get the support of the party. And to paraphrase herself, she lost, and I know she's hurting. This has been a more than interesting conversation, and I'm conscious that I've taken up your entire night. It went on far longer. We wandered all over the place, but maybe our listeners will give us license on that. Senator Jim Walsh, thank you so much for tonight's webinar. It was wonderful to talk to you as always. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paddy. I enjoyed it tremendously. And can I just, in concluding, just sympathise with you and indeed with all the friends of Michael Dwyer, and particularly with his family on his sad demise suddenly there a short while ago. Michael was an absolutely lovely person who interviewed me on a number of occasions and whom I met many times. I had the highest regard and respect for him, and I was so sorry to hear the news. And I know you two and others within the organisation will be missing him deeply.
Jim, thanks very, very much. Michael is a huge loss to conservatism in Ireland and to this webinar. And to me personally, he was my best friend. His month's mind is on next Sunday at 10 o'clock in St. Michael's Church in Gorey.
Okay.
And that's, but yesterday, Reverend. Jim, thanks very much for everything tonight.
Thank you, Paddy. And